Thank you so much for attending this conference. So I want to start with, in the last few years you have become an important voice in the Norwegian debate for drug decriminalization. So I was just wondering if you can tell us a bit how did this come about?
Well, you have to know that in this context, I'm an amateur. At best, I'm a concerned citizen with some resources, and I think it began a little bit with experimentation because we wanted to make a difference. Our company wanted to make a difference in some fields. We started working with youth on different types of projects, social entrepreneurs, and we realized two things. One, if you give people who have special, call it needs, a new opportunity that they didn't have before or didn't get before, in many ways, they will take that opportunities and they will start making better choices for themselves. So we started working with youth, and then as we went along, we realized that this was really something under the umbrella of inclusion. So we wanted to include other people who were not necessarily young, but who also needed sort of targeted solutions that the welfare state did not provide. So we also then started working with different organizations that were working with people who had current or past drug history. Gateavisa Asfalt I Rogaland, Medarbeiderne, and also the Football Foundation, which actually organizes now 32 different football teams, which are all people with, the only people who play there are people with a drug history, and they're linked to the football clubs of Norway. So that has worked like a charm, but underneath or along the way, we realized that the system, in a sense, is fucked. Because the system actually keeps producing, new people or people with who, for one reason or another, usually not necessarily their own doing, end up in these situations, and the system does not necessarily provide it. In some cases, it actually enforces through punishment the condition which they're in, or makes it worse. So that's, I think, when you and other people came along, and Bent Høie and others, saying, well, we got to look at how to change the system, and that's pretty much how I got involved in the advocacy part. Because I'm not a politician. I just want to provide evidence that doing things differently works better than what we're doing today, and so therefore reforms. I'm not against them because sometimes they're needed, but by the time you get to the reform, it is very costly, both human and money-wise. It takes a long time. It's usually a compromise of some sort. And by the time you actually get the reform rolling, some of the data you based it on are they're outdated. So we would like, I'm pretty much, like Dagfinn was saying, we're more like into experimentation, trying things as we go along, see if it works, learn from other countries or parties or organizations, and then try to find a good solution or a good balance along the way. So that's what we do in business, right? I mean, we don't sort of throw everything into one basket and hope it goes well. We take the path perhaps less traveled, and then we try something else.
You got heavily involved in our decriminalize campaign called Straff Skader in Norwegian. I hope most of the people in the audience, especially those from Norway, already knows about this campaign. We showed some pictures yesterday, but for those of you who doesn't know about this campaign, just to give you an impression, we have a short movie to show you.
Cool. Velkommen til kunstutstillingen Straff Skader.
As you could see, the campaign ended up at the former government's press conference when they were to present the decrim bill. But it was actually your idea to use an art exhibition to push this message forward. Can you? What made you think of using an art exhibition?
Well, first, I thought the case or the campaign was good. It was for the right cause, but it also had artistic quality. You saw the photos linked with the messages, where every person, of course, the name is different here than in the real life, but every person was a real person, and of course, they represent thousands. And one of them here called Peter, whose father was an ex-policeman whom I met the same day and had dinner with, was the one that committed suicide because he, I think for the wrong reasons, lost his driver's license. And it will probably be proven that this was an illicit use of, call it, enforcement today. And these cases keep going on in more or less degrees, but they're getting a little bit better because the courts are running ahead of the rest of the judicial system. But yes, so art can reach different people in different ways, and perhaps reach people who are not necessarily concerned or understand the case, but they can understand the message through a different image or a different way of showing the case. So of course this was in the middle of the pandemic in January of 21, so that kind of sucked. So there was less people at the exhibition, but I think we did pretty good work on spreading it through different types of media.
You had to be the program host as well, because we were only allowed to have 5 people. So I couldn't do anything. I had to just, and then I had to ask him, excuse me, do you think you could just say welcome and do the whole hosting thing as well? And he was very sporty and did that as well. So yeah, that was impressive. When you received your honorary membership from us, I think it was 2 years ago, you said that you consider this to be a human rights issue at its core. Can you elaborate on that?
Of course, I'm not a human rights expert either. Basically, I'm an expert on nothing. But I was at the time, and I had been for 8.5 years, the chair of the Council on Ethics, advising the Norwegian Central Bank, who oversees the oljefondet, the Norwegian sovereign fund, which I think is now $1.6 trillion or something like that. So I kind of felt that I was, appointed to a position where I could start talking about things in a different manner, also on a sort of conceptual level. I was talking to the biggest companies in the world and telling them to behave. or if not, they will be thrown out. So why couldn't I talk to the Norwegian society or politicians about human rights? Because human rights is a very core part of the fund's sort of norms in a way. And then, of course, I started, and I think many of you here, I learned a lot from you guys when it comes to the police scandal that Dag mentioned yesterday, and all kinds of digging that was done by many of you, and which you presented on Twitter. And I started, in a sense, connecting the dots. That this was not sort of individual people doing dumb things because they had a uniform on or because they had an office as a politicians. This was what I will call a unique commonality of interest in keeping the punishing system going. And by doing that, it actually allowed these, what I will call human rights violations, to go on. Simply because the system actually said, it's okay, we protect you. We are basically saying that for moral reasons, you can go on apprehending young people and pulling their panties down, and you can take their mobile phones, and you can take their driver's license, and you can do all these things. When it turns out you probably couldn't, you probably never could. And when that is not done on the system-wide basis, I dare to say that there's some kind of human rights violations going on here. So of course, I mean, we could take it to Strasbourg, or but I don't think it. I think we need to clean up our own shit, and we've tried in a sense. So.
What do you think of the current government's effort on this, and do you think they will deliver on their promise to create an even better drug policy reform, as they said they would?
No. No, because they are, and I think that's partly where the system failure is, that the current government, and I don't know how to present this in a nice way, but the current government is a kind of a weak government. If it was strong, it could probably go ahead and make a good reform, but it is a weak government, and therefore it's a reform, if they ever passed one, would probably be a very diluted and filled with compromises and not a real reform. It would probably not include decriminalization. It would probably not include a reform of the police in many ways, of the judicial part of the police. So I'm not very optimistic. So I think we basically need a new government to actually pull it through. I'm afraid so.
So do you think that we will have a decriminalization bill passed in the next election if it's, what can I say, new parties entering the government? Or do you think this was our chance and we lost it?
No. I mean, every great truth begins with the blasphemy. I didn't say that, George Bernard Shaw did. Meaning that what we are talking about here, whether it's drug reform, decriminalization, supporting people who today don't get the help because of some screwy system, it's all blasphemy. But by the time that our grandchildren grow up, they will see this is the truth, and it's the truth today, but it's not evident for everyone. So of course we can't give up. I mean, I think it's not that long ago that you didn't have same-sex marriage. So there's a lot of laws that have been passed recently that now seem evident. And this will also seem evident, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And I think, as young politicians grow up, I mean, if you took all the youth parties, I think there's only one that could probably be a little bit against it. They're all for it. Of course, they will do more compromises when they get older. Still, yeah, no, I think this will happen. Hopefully in my lifetime.
Just so you know, in the audience, if you have any questions, you can send it on Slido, and we might have time for him to answer that as well. But you were also essential in funding our clinic, Eika-klinikken, which is a low-threshold clinic for people with drug dependence here in Oslo. Can you say something? Why did you decide to help us out? And did anyone warn you that this might be a little bit radical?
I like radical. In the sense that that's when you make more of a difference. And I mean, we try to be what we call additional, in the sense that we try to be there when it's very important, and then when no one else is there. And in this case, someone else also did follow, so I think we're more people who can actually support it now. And I think there's a growing, as you mentioned to me earlier, that there's a growing understanding that this is needed. So the fact that it's controversial, and maybe even could be, I don't know, partly outside the system, I wouldn't use the word illegal, but I mean it's borderline, makes it more fun to actually poke the politicians. But they need to see that this will happen, that it'll survive regardless of political support, and therefore they cannot ignore it. And therefore, you know, in the end, they will have to accept it.
Yes, I think I support. So just for the record, Eika-klinikken is now also funded by the municipality here in Oslo, and hopefully it's not seemed as radical anymore, but it was just 2 years ago, I think.
But just to follow up the previous question, before the next election, I mean, we should really ask every party, what is your position going in regarding drug reform or decriminalization especially, and make them commit up front. So that is clear, because that could be one of the ways that they could find together in a government that actually will pass it. And I think this is something we're not going to start it now, because the Conservative Party has their own troubles right now, but once they get their stuff in order, hopefully, you know, we can start working on that. And I think that's going to be, that could be one of the sort of, I wouldn't call it deciding factors, but you know, we should really hold that flag up high so they can't ignore it.
So last question. I'm just going to check if there's any questions on Slido. Well, yeah. Okay, so many questions here. I have to choose one of them.
I'm going to be here for lunch, at least part of it, so you can also ask me outside.
Yeah, so one is asking if you or Ferd is at the moment supporting any research on drug-related themes. If so, what, and any particular reasons for those projects?
We try to focus on those organizations that actually already are doing things that should be known more or done more. Pure research, we have no clue in how, you know, who does what or what would be worthwhile. If an organization came to us and said, we would like to do this in order to, or understand this in order to do this, maybe. But we're supporting the doing, the entrepreneurial part, moving the needle, showing evidence. We love the fact that these street football teams, there are about 470 people playing every year. About 40 to 50 go on every year to have jobs or school. I mean, there's no system anywhere that can show that type of numbers. And if you transfer that into hard cash, you might say, the net present value of every person doing that is 12 million kroner. So you can spend a lot of money if you can make that impact. But instead, we keep doing a lot of stuff that doesn't work and doesn't get measured. So that's part of the welfare state. We want to take care of everyone, but we don't take care of those who actually are outside the system.
Thank you so much. I think this is very wise words and to finish this conversation. So thank you so much, Johan, and a big applause for Johan.